Hello, welcome back to the channel, and we're going to be talking more Steam Deck today. So you may recall I did a video on RDNA 2 GPU performance where I compared a VEGA teraflop to an RDNA teraflop. And make sure to go and check that video out because we're going to be carrying on from there. Now in this video, we're going to be talking about LPDDR5 RAM on the Steam Deck and also memory bandwidth on APUs. We're going to be covering what LPDDR5 is and how fast it runs, but just like in our GPU performance video, we're going to have to compare it to something else because LPDDR5 isn't available yet. So we're going to look at Ryzen 4000 and Ryzen 2000 APUs and see how increasing the memory speed can lead to improved performance. Now, I'm not going to speculate on the exact performance due to this RAM because there are just too many variables, but I hope this video is a good guide to what to expect with LPDDR5 RAM. Okay, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And we have a Discord server, so come along and join us there, and I'll leave a link in the description below. First things first, these are the specs of the Steam Deck, and it uses 16GB of LPDDR5 onboard RAM, 5500 megatransfers per second, quad 32-bit channels. If you're wondering about megatransfers per second versus megahertz, I'll leave a link below to Dr. Ian Cutress's explanation of megatransfers per second versus megahertz. In a one-line nutshell, according to Dr. Cutress, who writes for AnandTech, megatransfers per second is the more correct terminology to use when discussing speed of memory. Megatransfers per second is like miles per hour or kilometers per hour. It's the speed, whereas hertz is defined as cycles per second. For more info, check his video. The other interesting piece of information here is that Valve later updated the specs page to quad 32-bit channels, or a 128-bit memory interface, which allowed us to work out the memory bandwidth of the Steam Deck. This works out to be about 88GB per second, which if you just compare it to other products out there is kind of low. The Series S has 224GB per second, the Series X has 560GB per second, and the PS5 has 448GB per second, though obviously these systems are pushing higher resolutions. But even if you compare it to the PS4, that has 172GB per second, and the Steam Deck should have similar compute power of about 1.8 teraflops. However, another way to think about this is gigabytes per second per GPU teraflop. If you have lots of teraflops, you also want to have enough memory bandwidth to feed those compute units. And here, the Steam Deck is actually comparable to many of the latest consoles running at 1.6 teraflops or 1.6 gigahertz will net you 53.72 gigabytes per second per GPU teraflop. This doesn't mean you're getting PS5 or even Series S performance. It just means that the memory bandwidth won't actually be bottlenecking those 8 compute units. You've all heard of the highway analogy when discussing bandwidth. You have the same number of cars per lane flowing through the highway on a Series X as you do on a Steam Deck. Let's talk about how LPDDR compares to DDR and also the differences between LPDDR4 versus 5. Firstly, LPDDR stands for Low Power Double Data Rate. The speeds of LPDDR4 are actually comparable to DDR4, but DDR4 does have larger capacities, while LPDDR4 is smaller and more efficient in terms of power and, generally speaking, more expensive. The biggest difference between LPDDR4, 4X, and 5 is that each new revision has a faster data transfer rate. LPDDR4 tops out at 3200, 4X at 4266, and 5 will be 6400. For the Steam Deck, Valve has chosen 5500. As 5500 RAM is not currently available, I thought I would check how LPDDR4 and DDR4 memory scales on APUs such as Ryzen 4000U mobile processors, Ryzen 4000G and 2000G desktop processors. I didn't have much luck with LPDDR4 and 4X memory used in Ryzen 4000U mobile processors, which are mainly used in laptops, so I won't spend too much time talking about this. This was disappointing because I found that while the 4800U was slower, it was the most similar to the Steam Deck APU. Check my previous video on performance of these two processors. The main issue I found with LPDDR4 and 4X was that many of the laptop manufacturers did not specify whether the memory was in dual or quad channel in reviews or in laptop spec sheets. With LPDDR4X 4266 memory, to get the maximum bandwidth of 68.3 GB per second, This needs to operate at quad 32-bit channels. In dual channel, this only equates to 34 gigabytes per second. As reviews and spec sheets are unclear on whether it's dual or quad channel, it's difficult to really do any analysis on LPDDR4 and 4X based on existing reviews and benchmarks out there. If you want to check out the graphics performance of Ryzen 4000U processors, which has the slower VEGA compute units versus the RDNA 2 compute units, I'll leave a couple of links below for Ryzen 4800U and 4700U reviews, but bear in mind that the memory configuration is a little bit unclear, and also the 4800U has one extra compute unit of processing power. But given what we know now about RDNA 2 and also the 88 GB per second of memory bandwidth on the Steam Deck, I think we can say that the Steam Deck will most likely beat the 4800U by about 25% in terms of graphics performance. But I still want to check out how memory scales on APUs, so the next best thing is to look at how memory speeds scale on Ryzen 4000G desktop APUs, such as the Ryzen 5 4600G in this video by YouTuber Casual Game Test and Benchmark. Note, the desktop Ryzen 4000Gs have different power limits to the mobile 4000U processors, so the 4600G runs up to 65 watts, and this means higher CPU and GPU clock speeds. That said, it's simpler to keep the rest of the PC constant while adjusting the speed of the memory, rather than comparing results from different laptop configurations and manufacturers. Here, the Ryzen 5 4600G with 7 VEGA compute units was tested with two 8GB of Crucial Ballistics DDR4 3000 sticks of RAM in dual channel. 4 different memory speeds were tested from 2666 to 4133. Here we're talking 42 GB per second to 66 GB per second between the lowest and highest memory speeds. There were gains of up to 35% between the highest and lowest speeds in some titles. That said, it's possible gains as large as this may not be as evident in slower mobile processors with only 15 watts of power like in the Steam Deck, but it does show on APUs there's a general lack of memory bandwidth. Here in this graph you can see as memory speeds increases up to 4133, frame rates continue to increase, indicating it's likely more memory bandwidth would still provide gains in many titles. Therefore, while it's difficult to predict a percentage increase on the Steam Deck with 5500 RAM, the extra speed should still be utilized in many games. Let's also not forget discrete gaming graphics cards like a low mid-tier RX 6600 XT has around 256 GB per second of memory bandwidth, so 88 GB per second seems like a good balance for the Steam Deck. To round off this analysis of memory bandwidth, I also want to take a quick look at Digital Foundry's review of the Ryzen 2200G with 2400 and 3200 RAM to confirm if we get similar results. Looking at the memory bandwidth, there is a 33% increase in memory bandwidth between the two memory configurations. The results are as follows. AC Unity had a percentage increase of about 3%, Crysis 3 17%, Far Cry Primal 6%, GTA 5 15%, Rise of the Tomb Raider 16%, and The Witcher 3 12%. The results do show when memory bandwidth limited, memory speed does improve frame rates, so as I said earlier, it's always best to have memory as fast as possible. In conclusion, when APUs are memory bandwidth limited, we do see noticeable performance gains if we increase the memory speed. I think that with the Steam Deck having 88 GB per second and in line with other consoles, gigabytes per second per teraflop measurements, I think that this isn't just a system made up of retail AMD parts where the processors like a Ryzen 4000 have graphics as a secondary consideration. Here, Valve put as much memory bandwidth and GPU performance as they could due to the limited power available. So Valve could have come up with a system with a 4500U or a 4800U with LPDDR4X at 68 GB per second, but I think that would have been pretty competitive, but not that exciting. Here with LPDDR5 and RDNA 2, I think this goes one step ahead of those other PC portables, and I think that's going to give it longevity. So I think most people are going to be pretty happy with the Steam Deck. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.